we see our FBI agents, and especially in this first beat, we have Saga's character in the focus, her partner in the background drinking coffee. Hello, I'm Sam Lake, the creative director of Remedy. I'm here today to show you the gameplay trailer of Alan Wake 2, talk about the details in it, and talk about overall the journey of working on Alan Wake 2. Alan Wake 2 is an actual survival horror game. It's a sequel, but at the same time, it is a standalone experience. This time around, you will be playing Alan Wake himself, who since the events of the first game has been trapped in a nightmare dimension of the dark place, and he's trying to escape. We have a new playable hero character, FBI agent Saga Anderson, who comes to this small town of Bright Falls to investigate a series of ritualistic killings. That's how we start off. Soon enough, their stories start to tie together. There was an idea immediately when Alan Wake 1 was out on a potential sequel. Actually, with that, some of those ideas ended up going with a lot smaller budget into Alan Wake's American Nightmare. Between every other project, there's been a version, and they have evolved quite a lot. And they have always been action games. And only in this last version, we came to the idea of it must be a survival horror game. We knew that we want to go with this genre when the idea came. And we knew once we started talking about this that this will be perfect for Alan Wake. The trailer we have out now on Alan Wake 2, we start out with something horrifying. This kind of a ritualistic killing taking place. It's meant to be shocking, it's meant to be pretty brutal, just to drive home the idea of survival horror. Horror used to be kind of a niche genre. Now it's very much mainstream. There is always a ton of inspiration. Resident Evil games, for one. On film side, it's a wide range of inspirations going back to what were the original inspirations for the first Alan Wake game, which goes everything by Stephen King, Twin Peaks, David Lynch's Material. There are other elements in this game as well. When we go to the dark place where Alan Wake is trapped, we kind of have this nightmare New York, because it's a dreamscape in many ways and drawing from his mind and his fiction, and he comes from New York, and he has written for years and years Alex Casey crime books set in New York. So our dark place is now New York. Drawing inspiration from Taxi Driver, Seven, Inception, and then more recent stylized crime things like let's say the first season of True Detective. This is a psychological horror story. So out of this we transition and show you our title character, Alan Wake, as you would have it, waking up from a terrifying nightmare. We see our FBI agents, and especially in this first beat, we have Saga's character in the focus, and we are introducing her with this. She comes in to investigate this gruesome crime, and then these nightmarish elements start to come to play. She finds manuscript pages of a horror story where she's a character herself, and these events start to come true, which of course sound familiar to anyone who is familiar with Alan Wake. Her partner in the background drinking coffee.
It's for us. The text is about us.
Being a character in this side role as Alex Casey, a lot of fun making it. Going back to ancient history, When I last borrowed my likeness to a game character, so many things have changed. Then it was really just posing in photographs. These days, it requires actual acting, motion capture and performance capture. It's been wonderful to act with great professional actors that we have as part of this experience. I feel that I have learned a ton. Also about writing, needing to act out those scenes, you tend to have discoveries that you wouldn't otherwise, and realize that maybe these things should be taken into account when writing a scene. When we came to the idea of 2 FBI agents, obviously everybody has seen a ton of crime investigation television or films, and it's always a partnership. It's really critical then for that pair of detectives to have an interesting dynamic between them. You want 2 characters that are different, so that you can get interesting banter and interesting scenes between them. And somehow us focusing on what kind of character Saga Anderson in this should be, we wanted to contrast that with a totally different character on her side, and they just felt like a perfect match. And starting to write that dynamic into the pages, it felt really fitting. It's always an interesting process of story workshop, months and months in the writer's room, figuring out the connections and the kind of deeper layers of what we need from these characters to create this story. There is a lot of dualism in Alan Wake 2, and we knew going into this that we wanted 2 playable characters. How the game is structured is that overall it's a 50-50 split. We introduce both sides of the experience to you, and after that you can keep switching between them as you progress. So depending on which side of any particular moment you experience first, it gives you a different point of view and perspective. Yeah, it would be fun to say that all of this is figured out perfectly years in advance, but I also think that there is a lot of fun to be had in this work, looking back and finding interesting ways to connect it. When we were making Quantum Break, it was clear that at that point we won't be making Alan Wake 2, but there were some ideas. So we created this video, and it was an Easter egg, very small budget, with actors that we had available at the time who were doing motion capture. Certain elements there were kind of like in this sketch-like way present and kind of nagging in my mind as an idea that a pair of FBI agents investigating the disappearance of a certain writer. It took a long time and couple of concepts in between until we came here. And as it always is, when you really start working on a game concept and fleshing out the details of what the story really is, finding those connection points in it and figuring it out, you learn many things and kind of find ways of making it better and figuring what it needs to be to work. Maybe the biggest challenge for us, we wanted to tie the gameplay and storytelling even more closely together to each other. And that meant that we wanted to add other gameplay elements on top of the combat into it, which is, like pacing-wise, a big part of this experience. There is actually less combat than we had, say, in Alan Wake 1. A lot more anticipation for combat and creeping in and being wary and being afraid is a big part of the experience, which this part of the trailer shows us as we see with this cultist coming through the wall. We have some intense jump scare moments, but that's not really how we approach the experience. We have always felt that atmosphere and mood is a key part of any world building and any experience, it's much more important to us than having jump scares. Questioning what's real, what's fiction, what can we trust in our surroundings. At the same time, it's worth mentioning, it's also an Alan Wake experience. And for us, it was critical, absolutely critical, that it's not wall-to-wall darkness and horror and you creeping down a corridor and monsters coming at you. There are daytime scenes, quirky small town, larger-than-life locals to be met and talked with. You might glimpse some details of mascot suits, of coffee thermoses or things like that. So it's a pacing thing for us and a balancing thing to have all of these different elements present through the whole experience. We knew from the beginning that we want more variation, and that is the reason why the environments are quite varied, very different. The dark urban setting of the Dark Place is big contrast to our Pacific Northwest. Yes, there are forests there, the small town of Bright Falls, the neighboring town of Watery. All three of these are hub areas. That's a learning also from Control, that this is not as linear of an experience in any way as Alan Wake 1 was, a more modern game, if you will. Alan Wake 2 is definitely part of the Remedy Connected Universe. It's a crossover experience. For our returning fans, there is a ton of connection points and lore and interesting events to be discovered. Of course, as a creator, I would love everybody to play all the Remedy games, but very much the starting point for the design for the sequel was the idea that this needs to be exciting and approachable on its own. Alan Wake 2 is Remedy's most ambitious game, the longest game so far. That gives us a ton of opportunities for all kinds of storytelling, optional exploration-based material to be discovered. And when we have the universe to draw from, that gives us a lot of ideas and connection points. That's not the main point, though. We want to craft characters who are part of that particular game and a story that is about the story and structure of that game, and that will always be more important and more critical for us than having those connection points to the universe. Yes, we have ideas of what could come after. The reality of it is that when you actually decide to create a new game, it's such a huge endeavor and it takes years of work. We can now look back and see on Alan Wake 2, many things end up changing and many opportunities might not be there at a certain point and come back later on. Feeling very excited about a ton of absolutely bonkers crazy ideas waiting for the players in Alan Wake 2. Very excited about what we have been creating. On any game project, them being so big and taking multiple years and not really being able to show or talk about it, it takes a lot of belief. Wanting to create a sequel, waiting to be able to create the sequel, and now finally working on it, getting that positive response from all of you out there is critical for us. A lot of hard work has gone into it. We still have months to go. It does give us a boost and a lot of excitement, knowing that, okay, we are on the right track and this is creating a positive response in the fans. I'm hugely proud of all the games that we have created, but somehow Alan Wake, already when we were making the first Alan Wake, ended up being a very special game and especially a story for me, and trying to get to the sequel and now having been able to work on it, it's been thrilling. It's been really hard, as making games always is, but kind of like being on this final stretch, and yeah, it is special.